Afternoon all, welcome to Archant Towers on Friday afternoon. Dave Freezer here alongside our Chief Norwich City correspondent Paddy Davitt, of course, and we're day after the big night at Carrow Road, really, aren't we? England U21s, 0-0 draw with the Netherlands, qualifying campaign for next summer's Under-21 European Championships. I unfortunately couldn't make the game, but you were there, Pad, weren't you? What did you make of it? Was it a decent game for a 0-0?
Yeah, I actually thought so. Yeah, with a dispassionate view on it, I thought the Dutch were very good. Midfield areas, which conversely didn't, I think, aid Maddison. He had a couple of pot shots in the first half, same again early in the second half, but in between I thought the Dutch were dominant in midfield, and he spent a lot of the time running back towards his own goal, which isn't really his game. But there was one or two glimpses, and it was just a nice evening, really, for a lot of Norwich fans in the crowd. Really good crowd, just over 16,000. They must have been delighted with that, because it was a filthy old night as well, and it was was on the box. And not live on radio, I believe. So, all things considered, it was nice that a few Norwich fans got to, say goodbye properly to Maddison, because obviously the way the cards fell, we didn't get a Wes Hoolahan type send-off, did we, over the summer? And I think, speaking to the guy after the game, he appreciated that as well. He was a little bit taken aback and very humbled by it. And it was just a nice evening. And in terms of the pure football inside of it, it was another point closer to probably a qualification for the finals in Italy and San Marino next year, where hopefully Maddison can really embellish his reputation. If he does well in that tournament, who knows?
Yes, Latvia away for them, isn't it, on Tuesday. So unless they make a mess of that, then they're almost certainly going to qualify, you would have thought.
I think they need 5 points from the 3 remaining qualifiers, but that's probably assuming the Dutch win all their games, which isn't going to happen. But I did see a stat: England at that level are unbeaten in 32 qualifiers, so the prospect of them not getting what they need is fairly slim. So I think and that's what they need to be doing, that group. They need to be going to finals and doing well in finals, because the only way they're going to get into Southgate's plans is by showing that it can handle tournament football and all that goes with it, albeit at a 21s level.
Yeah, because of all this youth success at lower levels, you've still got Jadon Sancho and Phil Foden, for instance, alongside Max Aarons in the under-19 squad. In other years, you'd have thought those guys would already be in the 21 group. You look at Ryan Sessegnon, he's only 18, so it's really, really competitive group. Last 21s championship, that was when they lost to Germany in the semis, wasn't it? When Nathan Redmond missed the crucial penalty. So Adi Boothroyd's still got work to do as well, hasn't he? What was the style like? I mean, people tend to sort of question whether Boothroyd is the right man for such a talented group. Did they play in a direct fashion, or did they look sort of easy on the eye still?
Yeah, I'd say more direct than easy on the eye. I think the Dutch were better in possession, technically. Just a lot smoother, knitted the play through the thirds, as the coaches like to say, whereas England were a bit more reliant on the sort of pace of a Demarai Gray or a Calvert-Lewin. We saw a bit more Ben Chilwell in the second half. I just think England, in fits and spurts, played quite well and played at a decent tempo, which you always feel English sides need to do. I know there's a bit more of a refinement. You mentioned lads like Foden that coming through now. Maybe the academy system is producing a bit more technically rounded players, but I still think English players are better when they're playing at a bit of a higher intensity, as in trying to replicate what they get in a club environment week in, week out. But yeah, I mean, Gray smacked the bar, didn't he, late on? There was one or two other chances. I think on chances England may think they should have edged it, but Maddison himself said a draw was probably a fair result. But yeah, in terms of Boothroyd, I'm not convinced really. I put him in a bit of a Pearce category, who's one of his predecessors in the role. I just think you've got so much talent available now at that level. You'd like to see a little bit more from them. But he would turn around and say, well, we're 5 points clear in the qualifying pool. I think that he was in charge of the Toulon team, who went and won the tournament there in the summer in France. So you can only really put your results on the table, and if they keep winning, then it shows they're on the right track. But you would just like to think that they could dominate a good side like Holland a bit more if you felt they were really really setting a statement out, rather than at times they were getting pulled all over the pitch, I thought, in the first half particularly. So plenty of areas to work on, but so much good raw material there. And Maddison, I think he said, apart from the reaction, was just how frightening the talent is in that group. Even him supposedly one of the best players in his age in the country. He says he meets up with the 21s, and some of the things he sees in training is just like mind blowing. So, you know, there's a hell of a lot of talent, and that's exciting if you're an England fan, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I went and spoke to him on the Wednesday before the game, and usual welcoming, chatty self, and I had made note of the players in that squad who are all playing in the Premier League. You've got Ben Chilwell with Maddison at Leicester, Lewis Cook at Bournemouth, Aaron Wan-Bissaka's just making a breakthrough with Palace, isn't he? Tom Davies at Everton, Gray, who you've mentioned, also at Leicester, Ryan Sessegnon, Dominic Calvert-Lewin at Everton, Solanke, I think he came on in the Champions League final, didn't he?
Yeah, he came on for Maddison, yeah.
I mean, it's still not... When I put the question to Boothroyd, you know, is the under-21 set up in a better place than it was, say, 10 years ago? He said yes, but they still think that they should be getting a lot more minutes in the Premier League in these players than they are, and comparably to the other nations, to Germany and Spain, they're not. It's still quite low, the amount of minutes they're getting. So we'll see.
That is a problem,
it's a tough one for him, isn't it? And it's clearly something that Southgate wants to fix. So as much as it was nice having Maddison back and all that side of things, for Angus Gunn, he's lost his number one place seemingly, hasn't he? And Dean Henderson, who's Man United player on loan at Sheffield United, seems to have got the gloves because he's playing regularly. So is it maybe a little bit of a worry for Angus that he might have made the wrong move?
Well, at this stage, yeah, but I guess he would be looking at it over a much longer time frame, and he's obviously gone to Southampton not to sit on the bench, but I guess maybe Angus's presence has spurred on McCarthy. Is it their number one again? Because he's now in the senior England setup, so you know, competition has really driven him onto it, whereas maybe Gunn felt he was going in there, and if he performed well in pre-season, he'd get the nod, and if he'd got the nod, then it might have been and he was playing in the Premier League for Southampton, then it's a fair bit he'd have been in with Gareth Southgate seniors for this international break. Very fine margins, isn't it? But he will still think he's, you know, so young still, and his time will come at Southampton, and when it does, then he has to grasp it, as he did down here last season so well. But purely on England under 21s, I would imagine he's less than impressed. You know, especially with it coming back to Carrow Road, he'd love to have had a Maddison type experience, wouldn't he? Where it was probably a little bit frustrating for him to be sat on the bench, because let's be honest, he wasn't sat on the bench at Carrow Road too often last season. So in the short term, it's not quite worked out for him for club or country, but you know, one thing he didn't seem to lack last season was confidence in his own ability, and I'm sure if he gets a chance, he'll take it, and who knows where we are in 6 months' time. Yeah, well, he's still a young man, of course, and we all know what he can do, but the sad thing for him really is Manchester City, Claudio Bravo did his knee ligaments, isn't he? And they had to recall a young lad back to be their number two. So if you want to be a number two at a club, you want to be at Man City rather than Southampton, if you're perfectly honest. So maybe a little unfortunate, but he's going to, I suppose he's frankly waiting for a dip in form or an injury to McCarthy, isn't he? So such is the life of a goalkeeper. Any comments or questions, do get them into. We'll be with you for around half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour. Paul Orber was at the game last night. It says Ben Chilwell was excellent and man of the match for me, and also said it was a great atmosphere with the band. I believe you may have commented on this on Twitter and opened a can of worms, Mr. Davitt. Only in passing. You know, there's a lot of debate about the lack of atmosphere at Carrow Road for Norwich games, and singing sections and various other elements. Possibly a team who wins games and plays at a higher tempo, but we'll leave that one there as well. But certainly you want atmosphere, then they make plenty of racket, those boys, with their trumpets and drums and what have you. But I'm fairly neutral about it. I'm not in either camp, but as a debating point, it certainly seemed to catch. And there was one or two who were pretty adamant they don't want to have that sort of noise pollution, to paraphrase, but there was one or two others who were not averse to the idea. So
if you sat next to a drum as a season ticket holder, it's going to get on your wick, I would imagine, isn't it?
Well, the actual, to give anybody who wasn't at the ground an idea, it was actually situated right at the back of the south stand on the halfway line, so in effect underneath where all the radio commentary gantry positions are, and I think speaking to Rob Butler, he said it was a little bit distracting because they were literally below them, and I'm pretty sure Edie made a few comments on social media as well. So I suppose if you're a broadcaster in terms of radio, you probably don't want it directly underneath you, or a fan in the vicinity. But We'll see. We'll see. I don't think there's any prospect of a band anytime soon, put it that way.
No, I mean, the attention now from Norwich's point of view is developing that singing area and seeing how quickly the standing section can follow, really, isn't it?
Yeah, the safe standing obviously flows into that debate. If and when legislation changes, I think Norwich will be at the forefront of it. Yeah. And who knows what a lower Barclay all standing would do for the atmosphere. It'd be interesting to see.
Okay, on to Norwich issues and a couple of Nelson Oliveira questions here. Colin Woods, whatever is Farke doing with Nelson Oliveira, and how about sorting out his shambolic tactics, apparently?
Don't sit on the fence, Colin.
Yeah, it's his opinion. Lorne Smythe, but, well, what do you think Nelson will be doing now? Well, presumably he will be training. He's not in international contention with Portugal. It would be great to be a fly on the wall, wouldn't it, on a conversation between Daniel and Nelson as to how they move forward. Clearly he is now here until January, we think, unless anything crops up, but we think all the major European transfer windows are closed now. There was a bit of misinformation on the FIFA website about Portugal, wasn't there, being open till the 21st, but it seems that they accidentally listed the men's transfer window as the same as the women's transfer window in Portugal. So as far as we know, Nelson is here until January. I wrote a piece in the paper which you may have read earlier in the week. From my point of view, it's up to Nelson to go to Daniel and try and build bridges, try and get back in the team, and who knows, maybe the Wickham game might be the opportunity. But how do you sort of see how the land lies with Nelson, Pad?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought that was an excellent piece you did the other day. I mean, it kind of does map out the scenario now, and yeah, he will be here till January. That's a given now. So with that as the backstop position, where do Nelson Oliveira and Norwich City move forward? Because just looking at we've just gone into September, so 3 months down the line, Nelson Oliveira has been nowhere near a Norwich first team. For me, not good for Nelson Oliveira and his career, and maybe not that good for Daniel, because we can get into the temperamental side of his character, but the footballing ability is not in doubt, and because there's maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on Hernandez, Buendia, Marshall to an extent, a bit more of a variation to how they're playing in terms of the final third. Could that suit Nelson Oliveira? Because he didn't help himself at times last season, but I think as well he wasn't really helped by the issues that Norwich had, and the goals for column would tell you that. Norwich struggled to score goals. Maddison aside, struggled to really create enough chances. Daniel might disagree, but quoting the stats, but I just think they are a bit more there's a bit more maturity, it looks like, in how they're trying to go about it now moving forward. There's a bit more variety, that's probably a better word, with a Buendia, with a Hernandez in the side, and Rhodes, obviously. Why wouldn't you want to, on a footballing debate here, nothing else, on a footballing debate, why wouldn't you want to put Nelson Oliveira into that mix, given there's a talented footballer there?
Certainly at the top of his game, you'd want him in there, wouldn't you?
Who can influence championship matches in a positive direction. Now, whether too much water has flown under the bridge, we don't know. We're not party to those conversations, other than, as I say, Webber's public utterances prior to the Birmingham first game of the season were, we've both reached the position where we feel it's best Nelson moves on. Well, in the interim, that position hasn't been reached, so maybe you need to have another chat or two with the various characters and just see if there can be a solution for the next 3 months. Because, as I say, I think purely on a footballing dimension, Farke would want Nelson Oliveira in the mix, and from Nelson Oliveira's point of view, if he's desperate to move, then the next opportunity is January. If he's nowhere near it between now and then, how does that enhance his career prospects? I just don't see it.
Well, frankly, his career is on the rocks at the moment. I mean, who's going to want Nelson on the basis of this? He's seemingly not done enough to stay in the plans of Daniel Farke. So other managers are going to look at that and think, do I want him in my squad? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's up to him to get his career back on track, and what an asset it would be to Norwich. And frankly, as much as Dennis Srebeni is one that they brought in and he scored a couple of goals at Cardiff, he is a player that they openly admitted is a bit of a gamble because they brought him up from a lower level. If you can get if you have to sideline Srebeni for a few months, a little bit, to get Nelson Oliveira fit and firing again, and frankly, economically, his true worth. This is a player who little more than a year ago, we were talking about Swansea wanting for 12 million. There is not a chance in hell you're getting 12 million for Nelson at the moment, is there? So you'd probably struggle to get 2 million, and he has gone nowhere before this transfer window is closed. So, from everyone's point of view, it makes sense to get him playing, unless, like you say, those bridges have been burnt to an extent where it's just not possible. But it's certainly going to be an interesting one to watch over the next few months, isn't it?
I mean, obviously, probably next opportunity to really put that to Daniel will be probably this time next week, really, when we all sort of reconvene for Middlesbrough at home, and you can guarantee Nelson Oliveira will be very, very high on the agenda, because there needs to be some sort of movement in the positions of both camps from where we are now, because on no measure is that a healthy situation to have him sidelined with no prospect of going anywhere else for 3 months. It's not a Russell Martin situation. They got a resolution to that. Even further back in the summer, it's not Stephen Naismith's situation. Jarvis, well, injuries are really hindering any potential to reach a compromise with him. But as far as we're at, Oliveira is fit, he's training, he's available.
We had photographic proof of it, didn't we? That he was in training at Colney.
We did.
Unless he was rolled out for that one training session where our cameras were there, but that would seem very unlikely.
But so common sense is what we need now from both sides. And even if it is literally just let's reach a position where for the next 3 months we can move forward together, and then they can review it again in January. But it's no, to me, solution to have Nelson Oliveira basically running around with no prospect of being involved on a match weekend. That's not good for him. That's not good for Norwich.
Well, expanding on the tactics issue, which Colin had mentioned, obviously he wasn't a fan of Farke's tactics. Dave Clark says it doesn't matter who's up top, they are simply starved of service. And Paul Albert says, I'm still not sure I understand the Farke style of play at Norwich. Do you both have a clear idea? Is it supposed to be so slow? Now, I mean, in terms of being slow, I have to say I think that's a bit of an easy criticism that is followed on from last year, in that I think so far this season we have seen more of an inclination to get the ball forward quicker.
Oh, sorry, Sunday, there might not have been a lot of quality on show, but that might have been tied to Leitner playing a lot deeper than he has been. Basically, he was alongside Tete in a 2 in front of the back 4, and it was almost a policy shift, with Buendia in the side and Hernandez and Rhodes to an extent, although I take the point, Rhodes has not had a great deal of service in the last few games, and it's certainly, to me, his game is in the penalty box with balls coming in front of him, not trying to hold off a defender and bring a ball down out of the sky. That really isn't, for me, getting the best out of Jordan Rhodes, so that needs to be tweaked. But in terms of the lateral passing that frustrates so many, because it is quite pedestrian and measured and predictable when there isn't any tempo involved in it, as we saw in the first 20-25 minutes against Leeds. But I thought Portman Road, they did try and go longer, quicker. So there is, I'd take your point, there is a bit more variety to it, but you do always get the sense that if Farke had his way, in an ideal world, he would want the more measured Leitner passing it off the centre backs, getting it back, passing it out to the full backs, and that, I think, for most Norwich fans, well, most football fans, maybe that's a cultural thing in this country. I think that isn't possibly the most favoured type of football you want to see.
It's about being sharp, though, isn't it? You look at Leeds when they came here; they were just they weren't taking touches; they were just passing the ball straight off. And if you're going to deploy that system like Fulham did last year, you've got to do it so well to make it work.
Fulham last season as well. Fulham were probably the best footballing side in the division. I remember them coming down at Easter, playing football, but playing it with a tempo and with an urgency to the way they move the ball, and progressive as well, not continually laterally. There was forward movement with their passing. That philosophy, if you want to call it that, can be adapted even in the Championship. It might be harder to do it in the Championship than the Premier League, but I think you can do it, but they're not maybe doing it at the urgency and the tempo that they need, because it's Preston down here last midweek, Alec Neil knew full well you get 2 banks of 4, you sit on top of your keeper and you just frustrate. And Norwich didn't move on that occasion, didn't move, even though they went on to win the game. They're not moving the ball quick enough. Yeah,
well, I've just finished writing my column actually for tomorrow's paper, and I've had a closer look at the midfield. So you can see that in tomorrow's papers or at PinkUn.com. But they've got a load of options, and they've got Kenny McLean and Mario Vrancic both going to be back fit very soon as well. So it is going to be interesting to see how that develops. But the one thing that has been, I found, maybe, like you mentioned it there, culturally, is that the whole possession football is probably a cultural shift in England, in that we're not seeing the same type of football that was played 15-20 years ago, and that a lot of teams, even in the Championship now, are shifting it along midfield. It's when you see Moritz Leitner, it frustrated me earlier in the season when he was taking the easy pass backwards rather than turning towards goal and trying to play forward when there is no reason not to. Sideways for the point of sideways is stupid and a waste of everyone's time when football is about scoring goals at the end of the day, isn't it? So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. But the one thing you can say for Farke's midfield is that, talking about formations and stuff, it's not solid, is it? You know, Leitner, even on Sunday, he was all over the pitch and he tends to float around. I wonder whether in the Championship you just need a bit more to get back to being a bit more of a solid shape, a bit more of a solid structure. And I wonder whether once you've got Kenny McLean and his left foot in there, that might come. Possibly,
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's to the same degree as this time last year, because obviously this time last year we're coming off Millwall and the wailing and gnashing of teeth that went with that. But there is still a distinct sense that he's still working things out, and you know, you can debate now whether he should still be at this stage of the development cycle, how long he's been in the building, how many windows he's had. He's bringing in his players as well. It's not the squad he inherited when he walked in on day one. You know, and I think that's a fair comment. I think that's a fair charge to lay at him. It should, to the degree it feels like, as you say there, the midfield doesn't feel quite right, the forward end of the pitch doesn't feel quite right. Should we still be at this stage to this degree? Maybe at this, possibly not.
Should it be a bit more nailed down? I mean, Dave mentioning about the
Dave's not having it. Dave Clark's not having it.
Yeah, he said, come on guys, the football has been woeful for a period of time now, for a good period of time now. We couldn't beat bottom of the league and the worst Ipswich team I've seen for a decade. Now, the point about the striker being isolated, I think the last few games, unfortunately, Rose has looked a bit more isolated than he did early stages, so that's something they definitely got to be aware of. Yeah. But although he has got Pookie and support, so I think that's helped to an extent. But Rhodes is starting to do what Oliveira did a bit, in that he's dropping deeper and deeper, trying to get involved in things, but you need him to be leading the line like he was early stages and showing that instinct. But I think it's difficult to judge the Ipswich game on them being bottom of the league and everything that goes involved with it, because
the bottom of the league at this stage, it's irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant.
Form just goes out of the window of the derby. It is an arm wrestle, isn't it? And if they play like that against Wigan, Reading, QPR in the games we've got coming up, yes, there's a problem. But I just don't think you can quite make the judgment on Ipswich, because it goes out of the window on that day.
Yeah, I mean, of course you would like to think Norwich, player for player, have better players than Ipswich, but I think off the top of my head, 4 of the last 5 derbies have been drawn. So, this isn't suddenly some major shift in the balance of power in this part of the world. Norwich have struggled for 2 or 3 seasons now to get the better of, the days of the 4-1, 5-1 and the playoffs semi-final aggregates are sadly behind us for the foreseeable. So, this talk that Norwich should go there and should beat a poor Ipswich side, well, who finished above who last season?
So that's a good point. By what was it, 2 goals or something on goal difference, but. Yeah, I mean, I think Ipswich have got more than bottom of the table. They may well end up being in the relegation, so Norwich could still be at this stage if things were to continue to go badly for both of them, and they both make changes in manager / head coach and make the wrong appointments. Of course, it could turn into relegation. Where, like you say, we're only 6 games in, so things can change dramatically. Hamish Jolly. Deep breath on this one, it's a bit of a longer comment. For all the talk that we have a more balanced squad, we're worse off points wise this time than this time last year. Yes, off the top of my head, I think that's right. 2 points worse off than they were at this point last year. Michael tried to gloss over it after the Ipswich game, but Ewan Roberts posted an interesting article yesterday. What are your thoughts? I think Ewan said he's expecting
long hard season.
Do you think we're going to struggle this year? Or is there light at the end of the tunnel based on what we've seen so far? I know it's early days, and that is the thing. This next block of fixtures is going to be huge, isn't it? By the time we get to the next international break, start of October, that'll have been another 6 league games plus the Wycombe game.
Yeah.
If we're not seeing, or if fans are not seeing real positive growth in the team by that point, and the league position is not a bit more promising, then there's going to be a lot of worried people around.
Yeah, absolutely, and they have a right to be, because as I say, last season packaged as transition, and I think most fans would have willingly bought into that. But ultimately you finish 14th in the table. Now, if they can't improve on 14th, then that isn't good enough, really, is it? I don't think it's sufficient to write this off now as we're still turning the super tank around. They've had a very good window again in terms of the finances, stabilised now. I think they're openly admitting that within the club. So the financial pressure has been eased to a degree. So now the focus will switch back quite rightly to the football, and ultimately that's how they should be measured. It isn't about. Well, it is on one level, but it isn't about developing a Max Aarons or developing a Jamal Lewis or a Ben Godfrey to then sell them. Football fans, by definition, turn up to see their team win games and be entertained, and you wouldn't say that they're getting enough of either at the minute. So, the scenario you have painted there, if we're sat in the next international break and they're in the same position and they haven't maybe won more than another 1 or 2 games, then that is serious for me, because within that period of games they will have gone to a Reading, played a Wigan, played a QPR, teams who, with all respect to them, will be probably in the bottom half of the table. So if Norwich aren't able to go and get positive results from them sides, you can't really expect them to do too much against the top team. So that's a recipe, I'm afraid, for a long, to quote Ewan, a long hard season.
Well, from those 6 games, what are they off the top of my head? We've got Middlesbrough home, QPR away, Reading away,
midweek,
QPR away, did a Wigan home, Stoke home, and there's one other game in there, isn't there, which I can't remember off the top of my head. But from 6 games, if they're not taking an absolute minimum of 6 points, you've got to get at least 2 wins out of that to even keep things bubbling along. So it's going to be a really interesting period of the season. Paul Auber, how much is Stuart Webber to blame for our team performance? Farker can only pick the players he has in the team. I mean, that's true to an extent, isn't it? But Daniel and Stuart very much work on that together. As much as that is, Stuart does the nitty gritty, he's the one that makes it happen. Nothing happens without Daniel's say, does it? It's not like he's given players, Felix Passlack hasn't turned up from Dortmund.
Complete fallacy, that, I mean, Steve, you can list most of the German-based players that'll have been heavily influenced by Farker. So, the kind of separation of powers, certainly in terms of transfer, that's not how it is down there, definitely not.
Okay, and that leads on nicely actually to something that this may well come up on Friday as well, about Felix Passlack. Of course, he was quite a high-profile loan signing in the summer, although still a young guy. We've not seen much of him. Daniel DeFalco asks, if Max Aarons has now nailed down the right-back position, where does that leave Passlack? The one thing I would say about Max nailing down the right-back position, I maybe wouldn't go quite that far. We'll see where Ivo Pinto comes back into these things. Ben Marshall, we've seen it right
particularly his age and his inexperience. I mean, Jamal Lewis, after his first burst, was literally, this guy now can do no wrong, and then towards the end of the season errors were creeping in. His inexperience, I remember at Hull, he made some poor decisions there because he's a young man, he's still learning on the job. Max will go through the same thing, so I wouldn't say that's the end of Ivo Pinto.
No, and the thing, as we were saying, with this intense period, you've got 7 games, there's a midweek game between every Saturday game, all the way through to the October break. So they're going to use the squad. I'm just quickly reminding myself of what the other game is, because that's annoying me. But clearly Max has got the potential, but a young lad, 18, he is away with England U21s at the moment, unused sub when they beat Holland 4-1 at St George's Park on Wednesday, and he's now flown out to Belgium with them for another friendly on Monday. So that's probably sensible, given that Max played 90 minutes at Portman Road on the Sunday, that he plays in the second game, really, isn't it? So we'll see how that develops, while my laptop is struggling to load that one. So move on to the next comment for the moment. Jason Bond, keeping in mind Farker's unimpressive statistics and the current form of the team, where do you see Norwich City 3 years from now? We're losing pace on the quality in this league now, so would you welcome foreign investment? Oh, that's a big question, Jason. I mean, we all know the pitfalls of foreign investment, don't we? It can go wrong, you can lose the spirit of the club. You look at Blackburn and Hull and the horrible side of that, but the issue is whether there's any money out there to come into a club like Norwich, and Delia and Michael have made it clear that they're only going to sell to somebody that they feel is the right fit for Norwich City, haven't they? Yeah. So it's a bit difficult to say where the club's going to be in 3 years, but the one thing you can say is that the Championship has got a lot of money in it nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, if the ambition is to as it should be, compete at the top end, and ultimately try and get back into the Premier League, then you do find yourself thinking now that, well, that's going to be very difficult without some sort of level of finance. Now, people might come back with, well, Huddersfield didn't have a massive amount of finance, which is true, but is that the exception to the general rule? You see the money that the West Broms and Stokes and Derby, they're going to be throwing at it. Middlesbrough throwing a lot of money. They will be the clubs you think, when push comes to shove, will be fighting out to get to the Premier League again. So it can be done, but if that is the path Norwich have decided to go down, then it's far harder. To this organic cultivation of young players, some astute purchases in relatively cheaper markets overseas. It's a very, very difficult formula to pull off, as opposed to maybe just throwing money at it. So, I don't think it's an easy answer, really. I don't think it's a straightforward answer. But the reality is there isn't somebody who's ticked the boxes with the wealth, with the desire to almost be a custodian and carry the baton on to this point. And if there was, then I think they would seriously have had a conversation with them. So, as you rightly say, there isn't 15 Chinese billionaires queuing up, because more often than not they've gone to other clubs, haven't they? So 3 years from now, who knows? Who knows?
I was on the Along Come Norwich podcast this week. The guys were nice enough to invite me in, and they asked a bit about this. And the phrase I like is that the sweet is never as sweet without the sour. And okay, the self-funded model increases the degree of difficulty hugely, doesn't it? But Norwich done it before. Paul Lambert did it. They did it under Alex Neil.
It can be done.
They weren't chucking huge sums of money at the situation then. And Aston Villa is a perfect example of having the money doesn't guarantee you the success and doesn't guarantee you promotion. So it's a difficult one. And equally, I mean, I don't think he's going to suddenly appear, but if there were a multi-billionaire who was born and raised in Norwich and had the greatest interests of the club, if I go and win the Euro Millions in a few weeks and have all of a sudden got 300 million in my back pocket or something, okay,
you heard it here first.
I may well have the inclination to have the best interests of the club at heart. But interestingly, at Hull, the Egyptian family there, the chair, I think he's the chairman, is the son of the owner. He is born and raised in Hull. He has got the club's best interests at heart, and that's still gone completely wrong. The guy doesn't even go to matches anymore because he feels unwelcome among the fans. So like you say, it's a very complex issue, isn't it? And 3 years from now, who knows where football is, let alone Norwich City. So
I mean, the only thing you would say that, if it's a big if, but a bit like the housing market, the boom and bust culture, if the finance from the football sports channels of this world starts to go the other way, and the mega deals aren't being concluded, then the clubs may come back to Norwich if Norwich continue on this path of, as I say, an organic, self-sustainable, the phrase David McNally used to use, a self-sustainable, self-funded club. But the one thing you would say is that the potential for a great leap forward is dramatically reduced if you're, by definition, cultivating something, developing a Jamal Lewis and other players coming up behind him. That's not something that happens overnight, and again that bleeds into a little bit like for some the slow rate of progress on the pitch. How much patience is there from the vast majority of fans to buy into this?
Okay. The fixture that I couldn't remember was Derby away. So just to repeat myself, Borough at home, Reading away, QPR away, then the Wycombe game slots in midweek ahead of Wigan at home on a Saturday, and Derby away and Stoke at home. So that's that 7 games that I've got coming up, which is, you could arguably say, is going to define where this season is going to end up. To have a look at a few of the other issues, Sean Raggett, you may have seen at PinkUn.com, looks like he's going to be out until around Christmas time with a knee and ankle injury. It sounds a bit similar to what Tom Tribal did last year, wasn't it? Sort of contact injury that has caused a bit of ligament damage. Basically, has turned his leg the wrong direction, hasn't it? And that's a major blow for Raggett, because he got into the team at Rotherham and only got 5 games, and now he's going to have to sit around and worry about rehab. So that's a blow for both clubs' point of view, isn't it? And from what the club have put out, they will be working with Rotherham to sort of decide what's best to do from there, won't they? Okay. So we shall see with that. West Brom also in the Norwich headlines this week. Wes Hoolahan and Russell Martin both training, so we'll see what comes from that. I believe Nick Davies, the former physio here, is now the physio at West Brom. I think he was the head of sports science here, so that may well be the link. That may be how they've got their foot in the door there. But whether they end up signing for West Brom is another thing. Could you see those guys being able to do a job for West Brom, top end of the Championship? I mean, Wes is 36. Russ, obviously things haven't gone too well for in recent years.
You wouldn't think, though, by definition of that they're potentially going there as free agents. That would tell you that more to thicken out a squad. Rather, I don't see them suddenly going into West Brom's 11 and then being influential figures. But looking at it from the West Brom angle, there's two guys there who know what the Championship's all about, have had success in the Championship, and that experience in certain types of games may come in quite handy. Or just, as we know, certainly with Russ round the group, very good positive influence in and around the changing room. You need those types. So if you're Darren Moore, you're looking at it, well, there's no real element of gamble there. You kind of know what you're getting from two guys. You give them a deal to the end of the season and see where we go from there. Yeah,
exactly. I'd be surprised to see them both sign, but you never know. They are, like you said, both good eggs to have in a dressing room, and both got plenty of experience as well. Shane Watts-Jones, like someone has said, I believe, do you think we need another owner or partner to Delia Smith, or change owners altogether? I think we've probably just covered that one, although it's worth pointing out that it's Delia and her husband Michael Wynne-Jones who are the joint majority shareholders, and they don't run the club on their own either. It's a board, isn't it? We've got Stephen Phillips, Michael Folger, Tom Smith, Steve Stone is part of the board, isn't he? That it's a board that make decisions. It's not like Delia is at Carrow Road every day calling all the shots. That is Steve Stone and Stuart Webber's job, isn't it? So I think we can probably part the ownership thing just for now. I think we've covered that. In terms of internationals then, Pad, just to sort of finish off with, obviously we talked about the 21s game last night. Got some games this weekend. Jamal Lewis and Michael McGovern with Northern Ireland against Bosnia. That's 2 o'clock tomorrow. Team Pukki with Finland, they take on Hungary at 5. Switzerland take on Iceland at 5, so Tim Closer could be in that one. We'll see. It's just good for him that he's joined up with them again. And there's also an under-19 game to watch out tomorrow, Albania v Iceland. Now I'm going to have to try and get these names right, aren't I? Isaac Thorvaldsen and Atli Barkerson, I think. They're both in the under-23 squad. They're with the Iceland under-19s, so that all kicks off tomorrow. And anything which sort of catches your fancy, I suppose, Northern Ireland and Lewis, see whether he gets a game.
Particularly playing, the likes of Dzeko and Pjanic, world-class players, so that's great for that lad's development. And the quotes we've got on PinkUn.com at the minute from Michael O'Neill, Northern Ireland boss, more or less intimating that Jamal performs well in these 2 games here. He's almost nailing down, as he has done at club level, maybe the shirt for his country as well, which for a guy who's less than 25 league games to his career would be a phenomenal measure of his progress. But he seems to have took every step so far in his career in his stride, so they were very impressed with his debut against South Korea towards the end of last season, that friendly. So that for me is the one of the games you've listed there with the Norwich interest. I think just see whether Jamal can take that challenge from his international boss and really grab the shirt.
Chris Brunt has retired, hasn't he? So I think there is an opening there. I mean, if Jamal goes on to be the Premier League player he looks like he could be, you're looking at a player who could end up getting a serious amount of international caps. So obviously only one at the moment. So we'll see how that. And with Michael McGovern, it looks like he may have lost a number 1 shirt. Bailey Peacock-Farrell, who has become the Leeds number 1, he's keeping Jamal Blackman, who's on loan from Chelsea, out of their team, and has been in the headlines this week because he has turned England down despite being born in England, as Jamal was actually, because he basically sees his future as being more likely with Northern Ireland. So that's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Of course, Pukki plays all the time for Finland, doesn't he? He's got 60 odd caps for them. Sunday also 3 o'clock, Republic of Ireland under-19s against Wales. That's Adam Ider, of course, who we've seen making waves with the 23s at Norwich, and then we're into next week. So never stops, does it?
Never stops, mate.
But we'll be back with you guys. We'll be recording another podcast on Monday, and then, like Pad says, we'll be on to the Middlesbrough press conference on Friday. So that's just about all the bases covered, isn't it, Pad?
People go back to lunch, mate. Let's people go back to work after lunch.
That's what we'll be doing at least.
Yeah.
Okay, well, enjoy your weekends, and we'll catch up with you all next week. Cheers.